Today we are still in Ravenna, Italy, and we're going to be taking a look at another church. What we're going to be focusing on in this church is another apse mosaic. And this is similar to the one that we looked at when we talked about San Vitale. It's similar to the mosaic of Christ in purple sitting on top of the earth. As we talk about this mosaic, I want you to think about how the artist is using symbolism to convey a message rather than realistic representation. So let's unpack this mosaic here. Directly in the center, our attention is brought to a very large gold cross. The cross is decorated in patterns, and these patterns are similar to what we've seen in Byzantine art before. They're more geometric, most likely because the artist has to use tiny pieces of glass. And remember, mosaics are tiny pieces of glass put together to create an image. So in the center of the cross, if you look closely, you actually see a representation of the head of Christ. So there's a portrait of Christ there. Behind the cross is a sky filled with stars. So just speaking from an artist's standpoint, the gold of the cross contrasts the blue background and it causes that cross to pop forward into our space. So if we look really closely on either side of the cross, we see symbols, and these symbols are the Greek letters for Alpha and Omega. And Alpha and Omega meaning the beginning and the end. So basically Christ is everything, the beginning and the end. So surrounding the sky is a red patterned outline. In Byzantine art, we see a lot of circles. The circle's often used as a halo behind the head, or a circle is just the representation of divinity or the never ending. And again, this plays with Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. So this is all symbolism. So let's talk about that for a moment. I think in Byzantine art, they can't really represent spirituality figuratively. It can be a little bit clumsy, so the artists are focusing on the symbol. In fact, the whole image that we're looking at now is a symbolic representation of the Transfiguration of Christ. And the Transfiguration of Christ is when Christ comes down and shows himself to Peter, James, and John. So there's many representations of the Transfiguration of Christ where we actually do see a figure of Christ coming down. And showing himself to his apostles, but in this case, Christ is represented as the large cross with the image of him in the center. And his apostles are represented as sheep on a field. So on either side there on the field are Peter, James, and John represented as sheep. And there's a lot of green grass underneath the sheep. We even see more sheep represented, and these are probably supposed to be the 12 apostles. So on either side of the cross, we also see human figures, and these figures are labeled with their names on top, and that's very typical for Byzantine art. A lot of figures are labeled so you can't forget who they are. And they're labeled as Moses and Elijah, who were apparently present during the Transfiguration. And then on the bottom, we see another figure who's labeled, and he's labeled as Santa Apollinaris, and he's special because that's what the church is named after. And he has a divine halo, or the Mandorla, which we call it in art history terms. And he has the symbol of divinity, which is the halo, so he's being represented as godlike. He's standing frontal, and his arms are up in this pose like he's in prayer, and he's rendered very similarly to that of Theodora and Justinian in their mosaics from San Vitale. So finally, the big contrast here is we see the division between the earth and the heavenly realm. So the realm where the cross is decorated with a lot of gold, and the realm where the earth is represented with a lot of trees and grass and a lot of green color. Even above this, we see Christ again depicted with a book in a circle, and he's surrounded by the heavens and the clouds, and we've seen depictions of these clouds before. They're kind of like the red, blue, white clouds. Underneath him, we see more sheep on either side walking up to the heavens, and they're making their journey from Jerusalem and Bethlehem. So who is Santa Apollinaris and why is he special? So Santa Apollinaris was a bishop of Ravenna, Italy, and he was alive under either Vespasian or Nero, we're not quite sure. But he was persecuted for preaching his faith, and he was beat and drove out of the city, basically. And so later on, he would become the patron saint. And so that image is the image of him represented there.